Do you think we should stop giving out free prescriptions to everyone who becomes a pensioner? In fact, they get free prescriptions. You get free prescriptions if you're over 60. You don't have to wait to be 66. Get your calls in now on 0207862 2222. A leading economist has said Britain must stop subsidising pensioners if we want to save the NHS. Roger Bootle has said ending the automatic right to free prescriptions for all pensioners would be a good starting point to plugging some holes in NHS funding. So do you think this is a benefit that people deserve and should carry on receiving, or do you think it's a generous gesture that we simply cannot afford? Let's start with you, Katy. At the moment, if you're over 60, you get free prescriptions. They cost £9.90 if you pay for them.
Yeah, I think it's a real slippery slope to make it that people are going to have to end up paying for it, because I think there's so many pensioners who spend the winter literally living in one room because they're worried about winter fuel bills. And my concern would be the people who need it most are going to just hear a headline of you're going to have to pay for your prescription, and they're going to go without medication that they urgently need. I think perhaps we could make it optional, and you'd like to think that people with integrity would turn up to the chemist and go, do you know what, I don't need it for free, I will pay for this. But I think to make it, across the board, a blanket thing, I think that's a very dangerous game, because I think there'll be people who will go without through fear of it costing them.
I mean, one of the problems, Virginia, with anything that anyone suggests means testing is that means testing itself is so expensive. It virtually eats up any of the money that you might save by means testing. But at the moment, you only have to hit the age of 60 to get free prescriptions. What do you think ought to happen?
I think that they should leave things as they are. I mean, I have to say the current Labour government really seems to hate pensioners. First they try to sort of freeze them to death, and then they're sort of forced into a backtrack on that. And now we'll try and sort of make them die of some horrible disease because they can't afford the prescription. These are people who've paid taxes all their lives. They've contributed to the National Health Service. They deserve something in return. And if you're going to start trying to cut costs, look at the administration that goes into the health service. I mean, I'm told by people on the inside that a phenomenal amount is spent on that. Why not get rid of a layer of that?
Darryl, what do you think? Because, this idea you paid in all your life, so you're entitled to take out it as you get senior. On the other hand, there are plenty of wealthy pensioners. We always think, does Paul McCartney need free prescriptions? And it's worth asking, isn't it? There are plenty of people who easily afford £9.90 for their prescription. They don't need a free prescription. They're not going to be the ones that don't heat or eat. They're going to be the ones that, have a fabulous winter in the Bahamas or something because they can afford it.
Yeah, I think there's a truth in that. And look, I think we almost sort of have to have this really difficult, delicate, painful conversation about how much provision for pensioners costs us. It does cost an absolute fortune. And we sort of have this approach with pensioners where we sort of take a universal approach on pretty much everything. And we saw what trouble the government got into over the winter fuel allowance payments and trying to means test those. I think with prescriptions specifically, I think it makes sense for us to perhaps bring it in line with the pension age as opposed to it being 60. There are a lot of people who are very economically active at 60, who still work at 60. It's not uncommon to do that relatively well.
Still working at 60 because you haven't drawn your pension yet.
Well, exactly. That's exactly right.
Another 6 years at least, and it takes forever.
Yeah.
And so the goalposts are constantly shifting. So it's unusual to be 60 and not working if you've been working all your life. You probably are still working.
I think that's true. I think that's a good argument for raising it. I would also suggest that with pensioners, there is quite a lot of means testing in the system. The argument that means testing itself costs a lot of money and you end up, sort of offsetting against the savings is a really good point. I think we're going to be kind of aware of that. But there is already a lot of means testing that goes on with pensioners. And so you could sort of bolt that means testing on in a way that's a little bit more efficient, potentially. I've got to tell you, it's painful, this. I'm somebody who's 34, right? I'm a younger person. But in my bones, I want to do everything we can to protect a generation who, as you say, have paid in, for whom there are many people who are vulnerable. But at the same time, there's a sort of economic reality of just how much it costs to continue to do that, which is it's right in our face. We've got to deal with it.
On the other hand, people think, my gosh, a whole life, you finally get to 60. It's been a long old haul to get there. Things are going to get more and more expensive the older you get. Your working life is getting shorter and shorter, Virginia. And any kind of benefit that you can get, you sort of feel that you're entitled to.
And for every Paul McCartney, there must be hundreds of people who are nowhere near that level, I mean, if he wants to contribute something himself, then fine, all and well, let him do so. But don't penalise other people. And as far as making it the same as the pension age, well, they keep changing the pension age. You know, I mean, I've even forgotten what the pension age is now, you know, but there was talk again over the weekend of that going up as well, you know. So when are you going to draw a line under these things? The other thing that they're talking about taking away is free bus passes for the over 60s. Again, you spent your life paying your taxes, doing your stuff. Why can't you have a few, you know, attributes when you're a bit older and when your income is probably going to be less? Certainly not Paul McCartney level.
Let's talk to Michael in Leeds. Hello, Michael. Thanks for ringing. So this is free prescriptions. At the moment, over 60s get them. They're not even drawing their pension yet. Should they change the age range or something like that to save money?
Well, they could make it to pension age, yes, definitely. But why don't they look at other things? It's always the pensioners they hit. What about the people like the drug addicts? They get methadone on prescription. What about your alcoholics? They get beer on prescription. That's an addiction that they brought on themselves.
Well, Michael, I mean, it depends. I mean, that's your view, and you're entitled to your view. But obviously, there are lots of people, including medical professionals, who will say that addiction is an illness, alcoholism is an illness, drug addiction is an illness, and they need treatment to get themselves, you know, any kind of semblance of a normal life. And so you wouldn't seek to penalise alcoholics or drug addicts who are seeking treatment. It would be a hiding to nothing to do that, really.
They could do other things. They could put them on programmes to get them off it.
Well, so you think you should claw back the money that we're spending on methadone for drug addicts instead of thinking about maybe moving the guidelines a bit on free prescriptions for pensioners? I mean, if you just moved it to coincide with actual pension age, that would save money, wouldn't it?
Well, yeah, that would save money. But there again, what about all the people that haven't worked all their life?
And what about them? What would you do? What would you do about that? So you mean people who've been on benefit for years? And then what would you do? You would say that they can't have free prescriptions? How would that work?
It depends what prescriptions they're on. I mean, when I know for a fact that there's people on benefits, they haven't worked for years, and they're smoking dope all the time, dope makes them depressed. Depression is an illness. They're not helping themselves. They're causing more out of themselves. They should be on a programme to get them off it.
All right, Michael, thank you. I suppose that as soon as you do that, you say, and if you're overweight, then you've brought your heart attack on yourself, you've brought diabetes on yourself, you shouldn't have eaten that cake, you can't have your prescription free either, and then you end up in a right spiral of, you know, you went on a skiing holiday, you broke your leg, we're not going to treat you for that because that's your fault, because you fell over, you chose to go skiing. You know, you end up penalising all kinds of people across the board. I'm not sure that's going to work, but I mean, it's definitely a theory. Let's go to Eileen in Lancashire about this. Eileen, hello, thanks for getting in touch. What do you think about prescriptions and free prescriptions for over 60s?
Well, I had breast cancer at 62 and had 6 months off work, surgery and radiation treatment.
Yes.
And I was getting free prescriptions then, so it was an advantage. And I've been on my own 38 years with 3 children in October, and I haven't got a lot of money. And when I went back to work, I could only do 19 and a half hours, you know, for the years before I retired.
Yes.
And I think free prescriptions are a very handy thing because I can't get any benefits because I'm on the full pension and the council tax is about £1,100 to £1,200 a year, and my water rates are £49 a month now. Well, that takes a lot of money out of £14,000 a year that I get.
Absolutely.
And, you know, and I have to own a house and a car on it, which I think I do very well doing. But it's not easy managing off a small amount of money. But my brain's done that for 30 odd years, you know, being on my own with my children. So it's a way of life. But if I have to pay for my prescription, I've just been and got one this morning. And it's my 4th one for this complaint. So, you know, it could be, 5th one, sorry. So it could be very expensive, couldn't it?
Yes, it could. And so that's incredibly useful. Yeah, that would have been another sort of £50 or so, Eileen, if you had to pay. You're absolutely right. It's been incredibly helpful for you. And I'm glad you're so well recovered. It's really nice to hear from you, and long may your recovery last. Let's talk to Stephen in Wolverhampton. Stephen, how do you feel about this free prescriptions for over 60s in this country? Should it carry on?
Yeah, because when I was in my 30s, I had an heart attack, and I had to pay for my prescriptions all the way through.
Yeah.
I had another further 2 heart attacks, carried on working, still had to pay for my prescriptions, which was over £50 a month. Got no help off nobody. Had to bring 3 kids up, being self-employed, and half the time I couldn't afford to pay for my prescriptions, so I missed out. I left the prescriptions.
Really?
Because I just couldn't afford it.
Gosh. I'm wondering whether you could have, applied for help or asked for help or talked to the pharmacist or the doctor, or, what would have happened if they'd known that you couldn't afford it?
You couldn't get nothing. Let's say the only help you could get was that you had to pay so much up front, and you got help with it that way. But if you hadn't got that money up front, you couldn't pay it. So you got no help at all.
Yeah, so what Katy was saying in Virginia about, pensioners will end up just not getting the medication they need if they can't afford it. Or, is absolutely the case.
Can I say something also about this thing about addictions? You were saying that people say that addictions are an illness. Well, I'm an ex-addict, believe it or not. I am an ex-smoker, 25 years since I gave up. I wasn't ill, I was stupid. I was incredibly stupid. I knowingly did something that people know is absolutely terrible for your health. Went on doing it for a long time, had to come, I used all sorts of tricks to come off it. But that wasn't an illness. That's giving people an excuse for their own dumbness, So anyway, that's just a little note to say that I wouldn't say that addicts are ill. But I think it's a perfectly good point that he made, actually, that we are subsidising methadone, but we're telling old age pensioners they shouldn't get the medication they need. That doesn't seem right.
Well, we haven't got so far as to tell them they shouldn't have the medication they need. This is just a discussion. It's a hypothetical discussion. Let's go to Vivian in Wiltshire. Hi, Vivian. Vivian, are you there? No? OK, let's talk to Anne in Bristol. Hello, Anne.
Hello there, Vanessa.
So I believe that if you had to pay for your prescriptions, it would be a pretty penny.
It would, because I have 6 things on prescription. And I've got a congenital heart thing. I've had a heart attack. I've also got high blood pressure and high cholesterol, which is a natural thing with me. So I have to take some special tablets for that. And I just think, yes, there are a few rich pensioners that can probably afford not to pay for it. We don't know that they don't. They could be turning around and saying, well, go ahead. I'm paying for mine. I certainly would. I'm supposed to take an aspirin every day. I don't bother to get that on prescription. I go and buy it because it's, it's cheap. Well, it's as cheap or cheaper for me to buy it. But I've been paying into the National Health system since I was 15, and I'm 82 now. Those days it was 4 and 6 a week that you started paying the minute you got your first wage slip. And I've paid into the system ever since, and actually I think I'm entitled to my free prescriptions.
I think at 82, nobody would doubt that you're entitled to it, and long may you continue to take advantage of that free prescription in great health. I'm really pleased to hear from you. Thank you. Should we try Vivian in Wiltshire? Are you around, Vivian?
Oh, yes, I am.
Hello. So you feel as if this is an expensive luxury?
I do, because if, say, a couple are on $70,000 a year pension, they don't need to be excused from paying for prescriptions. And I think we can't afford that sort of luxury, definitely, without a doubt.
On the other hand, there's always the means testing element, which means it's very expensive to weed out those who could afford to pay from those who can't afford to pay, isn't it?
Well, indeed, but there is that. But then perhaps we should say, people should either own up and say, well, I've got, a long, big income. I don't want to have free prescriptions, and do it that way. But I feel I know it's jolly nice to get a free. I get free prescriptions, and I'm jolly glad I do, frankly, because I have quite a lot. And then, it cost me a lot of money, to be honest.
Well, that's the whole thing. And I think once you get to a certain age, this idea that it's jolly nice, even if you don't really afford, you can't, you could afford it, but it's jolly nice. You're pleased to have it. That's the whole thing. Vivian, lovely to hear from you. Thank you so much for your calls on that one.